Hello, good day. My name is Lewis Akenji. I'm the Executive Director of SEED, the global partnership promoting entrepreneurship for sustainable development. And I'm very happy to join you in this session. SEED was founded in 2002 at the World Summit for Sustainable Development by a partnership including the United Nations Environment Program, the United Nations Development Program, and its conservation program, the IUCN. It is hosted by Adelphi, its global office is in Berlin, and it is primarily supported by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, the Government of Flanders, the European Union, and the United States government, as well as several other partners globally. We support enterprises in two ways. The first one is direct enterprise support, in which case we walk through early stages. We look at acceleration, scaling up of operations, and replication of successful models of businesses. The second one is ecosystem building, where we look at the environment around which these businesses are operating, including the policy context, the finance context, and see how it can be made conducive for small and medium-sized enterprises to operate. Now, SEED deals with what we call eco-inclusive enterprises. These are small and medium-sized enterprises that typically hire between 5 and 200 persons. We call them eco-inclusive because on the one hand, the success of your business helps in addressing environmental challenges such as waste and waste management. But it also is because these businesses are embedded in the local communities in which they operate through employment of local persons of disadvantaged groups and addressing issues such as poverty. Now, in order to get a sense of what these MSMEs can achieve, we recently surveyed close to 300 of the enterprises that we have worked with, and I'll give you an indication of the results that we got from here. About 80% of these enterprises work in areas such as forestry, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable agriculture. Over three quarters of them practice waste management, and more than 60% of them directly contribute to reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of jobs created, they would typically hire about 28 persons, mostly at the local level. From these, about 20 would come from the bottom of pyramid segment of society. About 14 of them would be women, and about 12 of these would be young people under the age of 30. And in terms of how much they contribute directly to the environment, to climate change, they actually have per enterprise reduced close to 8,000 tons of CO2 emissions. Now, what examples do we have of these enterprises that we work with, and what can we say in terms of their contribution to restoring natural capital across the African continent? For that, I will show you two examples. The first one is Fourth Line Limited, which is based in Zambia, and it is our 2019 SEED Africa Award winner on sustainable agriculture. What it has done, it's developed a very unique beehive system, which is movable, it's durable, and it increases productivity of farmers very drastically. It's made of reclaimed wood offcuts and low-cost solar-powered bee venom harvesting devices, which are designed to fit the local and the natural forest environment and climate. The hives and devices boost productivity up to 75 kilograms, taking them up from 15 kilograms per beehive. And the way they are distributed and paid for is that they're typically consigned to outgrowers who produce for export or for the international market. And payments to these outgrowers is done through cash, through supplies of some of the needs that they have, and through solar product. They actually bring the operations by Fourth Line have actually brought lots of benefits. For example, they reduce cutting of trees, which would typically be done to get charcoal or for wood burning, because Fourth Line Limited brings solar solutions into their system. And they also use wood waste instead of tree bugs to produce hives. They also enhance the biodiversity and the forest system, and they bolster local bee populations, which are anyway under threat otherwise. The second example here is Agricentric, which is based in Ghana, and it's a 2019 SEED Low Carbon Award finalist in sustainable agriculture. Agricentric partners with smallholder and commercial scale farmers to buy their waste. It then takes the waste and processes it into high value organic products such as biochar, biofertilizer, dietary supplements for livestock and fish, and biopesticides. And it also further offers soil remediation services, and it's partnered with government agricultural offices to hold free livelihood empowerment programs for rural farming communities and sensitization programs on sustainable food production. Now, it's brought about a lot of benefits through agricentric operations. The first benefit, of course, is increased carbon sequestration qualities of soil through use of biochar. The second one is processed farm waste from about 400 farmers, preventing the equivalent of about 4 tons of CO2 emissions, reducing of synthetic chemical use by partners and farmers by up to 80%, training of 600 smallholder and commercial farmers, and increasing the income of about 400 smallholder farmers by 30 to up to 60%. Now, of course, these eco-inclusive enterprises face lots of challenges, and I'm going to talk about just 3 of them, which we found out from surveying them. The first one is the lack of access to funding, lack of access to grants, loan, possibly the very prohibitive conditions if they get some access to them. The second one is the lack of access to business development services. And the third one is small or very lack of support from the government and the policy system. Now, let's talk about the lack of access to finance. Eco-inclusive enterprises often rely on a mix of multiple sources of funding. Grants and subsidies are common in their early stages, but later on, they look at sales revenue, equity, and debt in the later stages of development. Multiple sources to access finance bodes well with interdisciplinary nature of eco-inclusive enterprises. However, the risk perceptions of traditional finance providers and the lack of access to missing middle funding means that these eco-inclusive enterprises are often underfunded, they're underserved, and they're actually unable to actualize their full potential, which includes offering both environmental services but also support to developing green local economies. Now, while many SMEs typically face these challenges that I have talked about, it is even more pronounced with triple bottom line SMEs such as eco-inclusive SMEs because their classification is not very typical and the recognition of their contributions to ecosystem services or to sustainable development is not usually at the forefront of government planning and legislation. This is something that we clearly need to address in order to get government support. The second one, of course, is capacity development. And most of the enterprises that we talked to highlighted lots of areas, access to finance and finance instruments, and also partnerships that can support indirect business development, but also in the wider ecosystem around which they operate. But when we talk about capacity building, it's not only about direct financial support, it is also non-financial support for business model and market access, as well as looking at orchestrating the wider ecosystem, bringing together broader support from partners to develop skills, to make sure that they get financing opportunities in the long run. And that gives them an understanding of the sectors in which they are operating and how to optimize their market opportunities. In terms of government support, entrepreneurs often struggle to find out which support and funding opportunities might apply to them and the regulatory requirements that govern their sectors. And even when they find out, it is quite difficult to understand what skills are needed to accommodate the requirements that address different aspects of their operations. The other micro issue is that these SME support programs do not always cater for small green enterprises. They rather look at quick high-tech areas and other more flashy areas that do not necessarily always speak to the environmental and social concerns. And last but not least, small green enterprises often struggle to access procurement opportunities in government due to sort of the stringent payment cycles or the lack of size, the economies of scale that can cover the kind of contracts that are out there. Now, how can we accelerate the way in which these enterprises focus on impact may become greener and support the green economy through policy? The first one I talked about is finance, and in this case, it is quite crucial to bridge the missing middle gap in order to provide financing tailored to the needs of social and environmental enterprises, preparing them for the next stages of investment. But we also need to design financing architecture that enables collaboration among investors and funders and creating risk sharing and co-investing mechanisms financing enterprise operations along different stages of development. In terms of policy, we need to start integrating eco-inclusive SMEs in stakeholder consultations when we're designing policies so we actually get to hear their voices. We need to use evidence-based policy insights in order to promote the development of enabling conditions around which these enterprises and entrepreneurship is actualized. And we need to consider prioritizing green and eco-inclusive SMEs when we're talking about public procurement processes in order to at least give them a leg up in the system, which they typically would not have because of the economies of scale of larger or other enterprises. One other way in which we can support them is increasing visibility and replication. In terms of visibility, one clear thing we can do is showcasing very promising and high impact solutions, not only at a national level, but also at the international level. But we also need to start triggering replication of these success models, looking at how they can be expanded, looking at how they can be replicated in other places, so that the wider architecture and collaboration mechanism brings together a broader momentum and see collective impact from these multiple enterprises. One other way, of course, is by looking at the enabling ecosystem around which they operate to create local capacity, mentors, networks of support institutions to strengthen the landscape of much needed incubation and acceleration services for these SMEs. This is the work that SEED has been trying to do. It gives a certain indication of the services we can provide to SMEs, but it also shows opportunities where we can collaborate with our partners and with national governments that are looking to build the ecosystem that will support these enterprises and that can see us through the transition to sustainable development. I'm looking forward to further discussions on these topics with you. Thank you.